Most gardeners are leaving serious value on the table, and it comes from treating their growing space like it only supports plants. That assumption quietly limits productivity, wastes organic material, and blocks access to one of the highest value crops that can be grown at home. While effort gets poured into maximizing tomato yields or chasing bigger harvests from leafy greens, an entire biological system is ignored, one that thrives in shade, feeds on waste, and produces food that can sell for more than premium cuts of meat. The result is a garden that works harder than it needs to and earns far less than it could. The crop in question isn't rare because it can't be grown. It's rare because most growers don't understand how it works. High-value mushrooms, like lion's mane, shiitake, and even more elusive species like morels, operate on a completely different set of rules than traditional crops. They don't compete for sunlight, they don't depend on soil fertility in the usual sense, and they don't require the same daily intervention. What they do require is precision in moisture, substrate, and timing. Miss those, and nothing happens. Get them right, and yields become surprisingly consistent. Before diving into the technical side, there's a bigger picture worth acknowledging. There are dog rescue organizations out there operating every day with limited resources, taking in abandoned and injured animals that depend entirely on human support to survive. They provide treatment, food and shelter, often without knowing if they'll have enough funding to continue next week. Supporting them matters. If this kind of practical, growing knowledge brings value, consider contributing in any way possible. Even small donations help keep those operations running and directly save lives. Part of what makes this system meaningful is that even the tools discussed here can contribute to that cause through affiliate support. Starting mushrooms. The wrong way is the fastest route to failure, and most people do exactly that by trying to build everything from scratch before understanding the fundamentals. Contamination wipes out early attempts. Inconsistent moisture ruins fruiting cycles, and frustration builds quickly. That's why a controlled starting point matters. The Back to the Roots Organic Mushroom Grow Kit solves the single biggest problem beginners and even experienced growers run into: unreliable colonization. It's linked in the description below. It's an Amazon product, and this content uses affiliate links, meaning a small commission may be earned from qualifying purchases at no extra cost, and that commission helps support a dog rescue organization. More importantly, it provides a clean, fully colonized substrate that shows exactly what healthy mycelium should look like. Understanding that visual reference changes everything. Mycelium should appear dense, white, and evenly spread across the substrate. Any green, black, or sour-smelling patches signal contamination. Without that baseline, it's easy to misdiagnose problems and waste weeks trying to fix something that's already compromised. Starting from a clean example removes that guesswork and allows focus to shift toward dialing in environmental conditions. Humidity is where most growers either succeed or fail. Mushrooms don't need wet soil, they need moist air. The ideal range sits between 85 and 95% relative humidity. In a backyard setup, this can be achieved using a simple misting routine, 2 to 3 light sprays per day, applied as a fine mist rather than heavy droplets, keeps the surface hydrated without drowning the substrate. Overwatering leads to bacterial growth and suffocates the mycelium, which is why restraint matters more than effort. Air exchange plays an equally important role. Stagnant air produces long stems and small caps, a clear sign that carbon dioxide levels are too high. Introducing fresh air doesn't require complex systems. Opening a grow area a few times a day, or placing it in a naturally ventilated space is often enough. In more controlled environments, small fans set to low speed can maintain consistent airflow without drying out the substrate. Substrate composition determines long-term productivity. Hardwood sawdust mixed with soybean hulls in roughly a 5-to-1 ratio creates a dense, nutrient-rich base that supports multiple flushes. Straw works as an alternative, especially for oyster mushrooms, but it breaks down faster and produces lower yields over time. Coffee grounds are often recommended, but tend to introduce contamination unless handled with strict hygiene. Pasteurization at 60 to 70 degrees Celsius for about an hour significantly reduces that risk. Raised beds offer an opportunity to integrate mushrooms without sacrificing space. A shaded strip along the north side of a bed can be filled with wood chips inoculated with mushroom spawn. This area remains productive while the main crops receive full sunlight. Over time, the mycelium spreads through the wood chips, creating a low-maintenance system that produces seasonal flushes with minimal intervention. You know, hydroponic growers often overlook mushrooms entirely, which is honestly a missed opportunity. While mushrooms don't actually grow in nutrient solutions, the controlled conditions used in hydroponics, like stable temperatures, high humidity, and regulated airflow, are just ideal for mushroom cultivation. Adding a simple shelf inside a grow tent can, well, convert unused vertical space into a productive mushroom zone. Temperatures between 18 and 24 degrees Celsius support most gourmet varieties, and slight drops at night can even encourage fruiting. Timing, though, requires patience, and this is really where expectations need a bit of adjustment. After inoculation, the colonization phase can take about 2 to 3 weeks. During this time, the substrate should remain undisturbed in a dark or low-light environment. Once fully colonized, exposure to fresh air and light triggers fruiting. Mushrooms can then develop within days, followed by a rest period before the next flush. A single substrate block can actually produce multiple harvests, though each one tends to be a bit smaller than the last. Harvesting technique, believe it or not, affects future yields. Cutting mushrooms cleanly at the base with a sharp knife preserves the integrity of the substrate and allows additional flushes to develop. Pulling them out, on the other hand, damages the mycelium and reduces overall productivity. Small details like this really separate consistent growers from those who struggle with declining yields. The reason certain mushrooms reach extreme market prices comes down to unpredictability. Morels, for example, rely on specific environmental triggers that are just difficult to replicate consistently. This makes them scarce and valuable. However, focusing on reliable species like lion's mane and oyster mushrooms still provides significant value without the same level of difficulty. Consistency beats rarity in most practical growing scenarios. As experience builds, scaling becomes far more straightforward. Instead of 1 or 2 substrate blocks, multiple units can be staggered to create continuous production. This approach ensures that while one batch is resting, another is fruiting, and another is colonizing. The result is a steady supply rather than sporadic harvests. The Back to the Roots organic mushroom grow. Kit continues to serve as a reference point throughout this process. It demonstrates what proper colonization looks like and how environmental conditions affect growth. Once that baseline is understood, replicating it at a larger scale becomes far more manageable. Lighting, while not a primary growth factor, does influence structure and orientation. Indirect natural light or low-intensity artificial light for 8 to 12 hours per day is sufficient. Complete darkness leads to irregular shapes, while excessive light dries out the surface. Balance ensures healthy development without stressing the organism. For those looking to move beyond substrate blocks, log cultivation offers a long-term solution. Hardwood logs inoculated with mushroom plugs can produce for several years. This method requires patience, as colonization takes longer, but once established, it delivers consistent seasonal yields. Placing logs in shaded, humid areas improves success rates significantly. Creating a microclimate can make a substantial difference in regions with inconsistent weather. Shade cloth structures, combined with regular misting, help maintain stable humidity levels. Positioning growing areas near water sources or dense vegetation further stabilizes conditions, reducing the impact of temperature fluctuations. Contamination remains the primary threat at every stage. Clean handling, proper pasteurization, and minimizing exposure during colonization are just critical. Even experienced growers lose batches when shortcuts are taken. Precision and discipline prevent these losses and ensure consistent results. Mushrooms also play a role beyond direct consumption. They break down organic material, recycling nutrients back into the system. Spent substrate can be added to compost or garden beds, improving soil structure and microbial activity. This creates a closed-loop system where nothing goes to waste. What makes this approach powerful is its efficiency. Mushrooms grow in spaces where traditional crops cannot, use materials that would otherwise be discarded, and produce high-value food with relatively low input. This aligns with a broader shift towards smarter, more sustainable growing systems. Small-scale setups can still deliver meaningful results. A single shelf with several substrate blocks can produce multiple kilograms of mushrooms over time. Expanding that setup gradually allows for increased output without overwhelming the system. Consistency and control matter more than size. The back to the roots, organic mushroom. Grow Kit remains a practical tool throughout this progression, not as a final solution, but as a reliable starting point and reference. It simplifies the early stages and provides clarity on what success should look like. Gardening at a higher level means thinking beyond traditional boundaries. It's about maximizing every part of the system, reducing waste, and increasing output without increasing effort unnecessarily. Mushrooms fit into that philosophy perfectly, turning overlooked spaces into productive zones. Ignoring them means missing out on one of the most efficient crops available. Incorporating them transforms how a garden functions, adding resilience, diversity, and value in ways that traditional crops alone cannot achieve. Subscribe and share this with someone serious about growing better food and building smarter systems, because small shifts like this compound over time. And when it comes to getting started with confidence and avoiding early mistakes, having something like that mushroom grow kit in the setup quietly makes the entire process smoother and far more reliable. Or